Hey,
Hey.
what's up, everybody? We're going to be talking about podcast interviews, what you can do to have better podcast interviews, common mistakes people make and how to improve them. And I think you can always get better at interviewing, even the best of us, even us. Recently Ryan was telling me about something I should do to improve my interviews. So, um, probably even Oprah probably still is getting coaching for interviews, or maybe not. I don't think that's important for her. But yeah. But we're gonna dive into interviews. Which Ryan, you're definitely. I think you could provide a lot of insight because you're an interview show. Like, what percentage of
Yep.
your shows are? Do you even do a lot of solo content nowadays, or?
Not lately. I would say out of 170 episodes, probably 10 have been solo and the rest have been interviews. So I would say easily more than 150 interviews.
Yeah, and it's important you don't get these mistakes wrong because nowadays everyone's doing a podcast, everyone's interviewing, even if they don't have a podcast. It's just like a thing they do still because they just want to use it for marketing. But there's a lot of things people do wrong, and they can turn them off. We've had some clients, like Christy Code Red, for example. She's gotten on some, and she's like very vocal, like that was a horrible interview, or that was a great interview. And there's a few qualities that you can do to make a good impression on your guests, especially if you're talking to bigger people. You want to make a good impression. So,
Yep.
some of the things there's some of the things we're gonna dive into is one, how to find good interview guests, how to prepare and actually do the actual interview good. We're gonna talk a little bit about tech, how to get that right, how to promote the interview, and then additional tips and common mistakes people usually make, and what they can do. So, yeah. When was your first interview, by the way?
Oh man. March of March of 2018.
Okay. Who was it?
Michael Coomer. It was actually
Okay.
in person. It was actually an in-person interview. I went to his house. He lived here in Atlanta. And I interviewed him sitting in his office. So it was like extra pressure because I was like, oh man, I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
So, what would you recommend someone starting from the beginning, like what's if they're going to start interviewing, what's the first thing they should know? Like for me personally, I'll share what I think is knowing your audience. That's a given, and who would they want to listen to, and what is your show around, and what is the guest going to talk about? That's kind of in that angle, in that format. How about for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I would say along those lines, it's understanding who your listeners are so that you don't selfishly ask questions that you want. You ask questions that your listeners would like to hear the answers to because like unless so we can go into this later. There's types of podcast where an interview like you can make it all about you and the relationship and that person because there's different objectives for certain types of podcasts. But if like you're trying to grow your downloads, reach more people, hit more ears, then you need to be thinking about what they want to hear and ask questions that are gonna incite excitement and enjoyment in your listeners because there's not always the same thing what you want to ask and what they need to hear.
Yeah, and I think when you reach a certain level, getting interviews is easier. It's probably actually too much people that want to be interviewed by you, obviously, because you have a show. Like I'm sure you get a lot of emails. I've been getting more recently. People wanting to hop on the show
Every day.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like I don't know. There is a wrong way to do it if you are pitching yourself, which can kind of like make it look spammy. But so if someone's starting out, like what would you recommend is the best places to start looking for guests to interview?
So I can tell you what I did, exactly what I did step by step. So I found podcasts that were already talking to the person I wanted to. I went pretty niche. So there was only like one or two that were actually talking to the people that I wanted to talk to. But I went out and found those. And I actually paid somebody on Fiverr to create a database of those guests that this person had interviewed. And so they went in there, they put their name, their email address, their website, and a little bit about what they do. And then I started reaching out to those people from that list that person made and kind of filtered it from there. So I went after people that were already talking to my person. You could also, look on different blogs, like different thought leaders in your space, like all that kind of stuff. Because the chances are people are going to say yes if you ask.
Especially now, it's so easy with Facebook groups and LinkedIn. Literally, like people just want to promote themselves. Obviously, there is some filtering you want to do, which we could talk about. Which is kind of what we mentioned before, just making sure that the angle and it's a right like content topic for your audience. Me personally, I another good way to figure out people you want to interview is people you want to have a relationship with or you're interested in knowing and you're actually genuinely interested, because that allows you to have more fun, the questions are better, and more can come out of it. And I think that comes across in the interviewer that you're that kind of interest. So as far as like selection, like finding the guests, is there any other things you think that are important before we get into preparation and the actual interview?
So like finding them, I think that a best practice is to outreach with video. So if you're doing it yourself, I mean, this is super easy. You can like record a Loom video or something. Like I think what's cool is to actually like type out an email and record the Loom with that email in the screen so they can see that like you did this like on the spot, and you can record like quick 20 seconds. Like what's your elevator pitch? Like put that in there, address them by name, send it. It's going to skyrocket your acceptance rate because it's very competitive nowadays to like get on other podcasts, because they may say yes, but they may say literally like we're getting a lot of people right now
people on your podcast.
Oh, you want to get on people? Okay,
no,
people on your podcast
to get guests for your podcast.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Well, this totally disregard all that.
Video still does work with DMs and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Video DMs, LinkedIn video DMs are super powerful that hardly nobody does. So that would be a great way to get like 100% open rate and actually connect with those people. Yeah.
Yeah. And saying that I think it's important if you're trying to get someone on your podcast to mention that who your audience is and how you think they can help them, kind of just boost their ego. Like, hey, I have an audience of like this and you teach this. Like they would love to learn more about that. Like they would love for you to like kind of guide them.
Yeah. And I also feel like one really important thing is like you have to know like what your niche is and who you're talking to, because you don't want just like everybody on your podcast, because you don't want to be Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan where they talk to a very wide variety of anybody's that are interesting. Like there's too many of those shows already. You're not going to be different. So like you need to pick your niche and go after people in that niche and talk to those people and only those people. It can be challenging, but that's going to be the best, because then your guests are going to know, or your listeners are going to know what to expect every time they come to your show. Like you're going to have a passionate following at that point, because they're not like passerbyers. They're going to be like, I'm going here because I'm going to hear X, Y, and Z. And they're going to know exactly what that is.
Yeah. Try not to pander.
Yep.
And stick to, yeah. Even if it's bigger people, I would still like consider like, are you a right fit?
Oh, I turn down big people all the time because my target is not big people. Like they're precisely not big people, just based on the thing is. So I mean, I get literally, I turn down 90% of the pitches that come my way because they're CEOs of big companies and best-selling authors, and I'm like, well, you're not my market. Sounds cool, but
Yeah. So let's say, all right, you got your guest. That's probably the easiest part. I think like there's a lot of people who get on your podcast, as long as it just looks right and the show's out. It's easier. If your show's not out yet, that might be difficult. So the next step is, preparation for the actual interview.
One thing going back on the guest thing, just a tip is don't, in your first like 10, 15 episodes, don't shoot for like A-level type people.
Oh yeah.
In your niche. Go like B, C players. Yeah. Like seriously, like get good at it. You're going to suck probably in the beginning. So like
probably goes for friends and etc. and colleagues. Like in the space, people that's probably so you're more comfortable doing it, and it's more enjoyable, and they're also to be less harsh on you. Okay, so now for preparation. So you got the interviews lined up. What's your method for researching on guests and like preparing for an interview? So
personally, I'm a bad example of this because I purposely don't do any research because I want to come in.
But that's not bad. That's just a method.
Yeah. So there we go. My method is to come into the interview super curious, and all I'm going to know is a very high level, like what they do. I'm not really going to know anything about their backstory because, again, my people aren't super famous. So that's kind of my strategy, is like the curiosity drive my conversation, which we can get into more of that stuff later. But prep, I would always say, like, if I was telling somebody what to do, I would say, like, take notes, understand what they do, what their offers are, like how they put their message out into the world. Kind of like the high level stuff of what they're about. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people that do a lot more research than that. I think it also depends on how technical that person is. Like, example, I interviewed a dude that was starting a Bitcoin, or not a Bitcoin, a crypto advertising agency where they I can't even explain it. So this is to my point. Like, I couldn't even interview the dude because I didn't do enough research to like comprehend what was going on.
You didn't
And
know
his shit
what
was
you
like,
didn't know. Yeah.
yeah, it was like I didn't even know what to ask because it was so complicated. It would have been really cool because I was interested in it. I just didn't understand it. So, like,
Yeah.
I think really try to understand at least what they're about. If it's if it's a more complicated topic, you probably need to do more research.
Yeah. Me personally, I at least minimum try to think of the headline, like the hook. Like, all right, with this person, we're gonna stick in like, like John Crestani, like working from home. Like, what's like the main theme kind of that I want people to get out or learn from it? And I try to, some people it's like, all right, I can go in with just not knowing a lot and be kind of in the conversation. Other people I have to have like try to go into little pockets, if I don't know too much, like if like LinkedIn before when I first started doing interviews for LinkedIn people, I was like, I don't know what to ask because I don't use LinkedIn. Like, what do I ask them? And so I was like, oh wait, so how should you post? How should you connect? What should you say here? And so I was like, I had to extract out of them. Um, but I guess it depends the type of interview you're doing and type of audience, if it's more business or not. So, um, okay. So what about like etiquette during interviews? Like, or not etiquette, but like, what are your pet peeves? Like things you would or would not do when you're asking, like probably interrupting is a bad quality.
So let's use you for an example.
Stop, dude. Oh, wait,
So
wait.
I was actually,
So yeah, song.
so I was giving Daxy some criticism or constructive feedback, it would be called. Earlier, I was watching a clip that we put out on social from one of his interviews, and like, so if this was the interview, like during it, like she was talking, and he was like over here typing, he's like looking down, and I was like, that's kind of it's. I wouldn't say it's like necessarily bad etiquette because you were like typing the comments, but it's just like distracting for like somebody who might be watching your content. And
Yeah.
even for the guests, like if they're looking at you, it doesn't like you're paying attention, they're gonna be like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
So I will say it's good feedback because I'm not wary of that. But like if it was audio, I'd probably be doing the same thing. Cause like I don't have to look at something to hear it. Like I can hear while looking at a cup or something, like I'm still listening, but even though I'm not looking at the person, I'm actually still like I can write and listen. So I think it just
Yeah.
came off like, oh, he's distracted, but I was just looking at the other screen while I was writing. But okay, so that's one thing. What else would you say is like bad things that people do in interviews, like that's bad habits?
Move stuff around. So like if you
Okay.
can hear this, like sliding stuff around on their desk, like shuffling papers, even like sliding your hand around. Like you probably hear that. Like a lot of people slide things around. Yeah, just like little things like that, I think go a long way, especially in the post production of things. Definitely.
Yeah. Facebook user says studies show multitasking is no bueno. Depends what kind of multitasking and when you're doing it. If you're cleaning the house, maybe, or actually, I don't know. Is multitasking ever good? I don't know.
Sandpaper hands. Yep. True.
Okay. So anything, I would say a bad thing that I see a lot of people do during interviews is if you don't acknowledge what they said. Like if you ask people, you sound like a robot. Like when people who are new usually do this, they'll ask questions and they'll be like, okay, so what about that? Like they don't like engage. Like me personally, when I'm on interviews and it sounds like robotic questions, like I'm like, okay, it's one of these interviews where I can't like have a conversation.
Well, yeah, and this kind of comes with people having an agenda. Like it's nice to have like for some people to have some questions like
But,
laid
like,
out, but
sometimes it's
like
good
when
to
you
go off
follow
course.
like I don't care what the hell this person says, the next question I ask is this one. Like I feel like there's so many times I've been listening to an interview and I'm like, oh, I wish they would have dove down into that more, but they didn't. They just went into some left field question that doesn't even relate to the thing they were just talking about. And a lot
Which
of
I
times they won't even elaborate on what that person just said. They'll just like totally change the subject. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, which I guess is the one of the things about being new, you're not comfortable, so you're like you're just sticking to, you're not probably not used to being on the spot, and it's like
Yep.
riding when you first ride a bike, you ride with training wheels. That's probably what it is. You're just kinda
Yep.
sticking to that. And it was
Yeah, I
June, by the
always
way.
tell people if you want to like hear a good interviewer, Andrew Warner of Mixergy is a great interviewer for like on the spot, like hearing something and then going deep on that. He's really, really, really good at that.
Yeah.
So I always tell people to check him out.
I think some of the people who interview celebrities are good too, like for shows like 60 Minutes,
Yep.
etcetera.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with big personalities and egos. You gotta know, like, how to engage with them, so
And sometimes you have to ask like uncomfortable questions to make things like interesting.
yeah. I imagine it would be a tough job, like, to interview sports people after they play a game, 'cause they probably just wanna go home. Okay, so as far as actual interview, anything else you wanna cover? You think people make a lot of mistakes, like, in the actual, like, execution of interviews?
No, I mean, I would say don't be afraid to go down rabbit holes, but you have to be equally as skilled as getting out of the rabbit holes. So this is a lot easier when it's facilitated via video. Like, it doesn't have to be a video podcast, but if you're on like Zoom or Squadcast or something like that, and you can judge people's body language, right? They can judge yours as well. So if you feel like they're rambling on and like you want to stop them, start to just do body motions like you want to talk. And normally that person will pick up on that cue and they'll let you in, right? Where you won't have to interrupt them. So it's almost
If
like
there's video.
let them know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If there's if I mean, but even if it's like on Zoom or something, right? You don't have to be
Just, like,
using the
cough,
video.
like, um,
Yeah. But otherwise you just have to interject. You just have to like step up because like going down a rabbit hole, like you can lose listeners big time.
yeah. Okay, so I think that obviously a lot of the prep for interviews is gonna be dependent on your audience and the subject matter, so we don't have to dive too deep in that.
Yep.
But it's a skill. That's one thing you should know. It's a skill you have to develop and get comfortable with, and just be yourself. Okay, so now tech. So this is a thing that a lot of people get wrong. Even like the bigger people, like they kind of ignore tech, but that's important. It's like trying to film like a Hollywood movie, which just like I can just do it with my iPhone. Like, no, it's why it's a Hollywood movie. Um, so what about softwares? Like, what do you recommend? Audio, video? What are your favorite? Obviously, right now we're using StreamYard, but there's Zoom. There's other ones as well for
Yeah.
video.
I use Squadcast personally
Yeah,
to record all my interviews. Um, I mean, the reason is so why Squadcast is different than like Zoom, right? They record locally on both sides, so it's facilitated over the internet, just like Zoom is, but it records locally on each side in a high quality WAV file. So as long as both people have a good mic, you'll literally sound like you're sitting in the same room as each other. There's no compression, there's no distortion in your audio. So that I use that. And I like I'm using it right now. I stream with my DSLR, so it's high quality video, and that's a Canon M50. Daxy has a Canon M50 as well, and you can use this as a webcam, just like I'm using right now. And then, yeah, I think the Squadcast is a good one. There's another one called Zencaster that's relatively similar. And I mean, you can use Zoom. Just know that your audio quality is not going to be that great, just because of
yeah,
how it goes over the internet and gets compressed.
yeah. And then the other tech stuff, the usual things we would usually say: wear headphones,
Yeah.
have a good mic.
Yeah, definitely ask your guest as well. Like if you're interviewing
At
people,
least headphones.
ask them to wear headphones because sometimes you can get feedback like through, especially if they have a mic, if they actually have a mic and they're using their laptop as the speakers, like you'll get that feedback into the mic and whether you're editing
even
or somebody else
I
is
would always
editing.
try to avoid like computer speakers or mics. or like at
Yep.
least headphone mics. Those are at least better controlled, even
Yep.
though they still sound pretty crappy. But and then having your audio separate if you ever want to do some fancy stuff. So cool. So
Yep.
this is actually an important piece, I think. Promotion. So how do you get your guests to promote the episode, and how could you best promote the episode for interviews? Um, so what's your process?
Yeah. So I think the best thing to do is to be very crystal clear on how, like, what you want them to do and how you want to do it and when you want them to do it. And all, like, obviously giving them a lot of like assets and things like that to promote. But what we do with all of our clients is we have an email that we send out to all the guests. It's very descriptive. Here's when your episode's coming out. Here's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to get as many downloads on the podcast as possible. Here's when we're going to promote it. We'd like you to promote it around the same time. We give them a time window on this day between this time. We'd like for you to make some posts. And then here's all the assets that you can use. Here's the copy that you can use. So we give them copy as well. So literally, we're just trying to take all the roadblocks out of the way, right? They don't have to create any graphics. They don't have to write any copy. They don't have to think about when they want to post it. So we're just taking all the obstacles out of the way, and we send all that over to them in an email, and we, fingers crossed that they promote.
Yeah.
And we actually send a follow-up email as well 2 days later, just to ask them if they posted. We go ahead and schedule that out. We don't and this is what I would recommend as well. I wouldn't like monitor if they posted. I would just like write a general email that says like, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure you got around to promoting it." And they'll be like, "Yeah, I promoted it yesterday," or something like that. Or, "No, I'll go ahead and do that today."
Yeah, and some people will eagerly promote it. They'll put it on their website, like they'll do the whole nine. Some people won't, because probably if they do a ton of interviews, that's not a thing they want to do all day. But the important thing is tagging them on social media, because it'll still
Mhm.
have the same effect. Like if you tag them on stories or in a post, like it's easy for them. It's almost like the same thing as the email, but they just have to click repost.
Yep.
They don't have to, like, they're still producing the content and still going to their audience. Obviously, like every platform's a little different. Some platforms like Facebook, if they have their account settings where anything they're tagged in shows up on their newsfeed, like that's cool. That works a lot. Same with LinkedIn. I think if they tag someone, it shows up on their newsfeed. So just leveraging those features for social and tagging them is important. So for promoting, um, yeah, I think that's kind of pretty crystal clear with promotion. Just
Yep.
make them the content and then tell them when the content's out.
Yep.
And make it easy for them, obviously. Like, so
As easy as possible. And this is also goes what we said about not going after like A-list celebs in the beginning, because what you said, the chances of like, big
them
people
promoting it.
reposting or promoting it, they're not going to do it. So the value you get out of interviewing people is you want to try to leverage their audiences. So if you start your podcast and you get 5 big people that never promote it, like the only people that are going to be attracted are the only people you have access to. Right. So it's better to kind of like work your way out, start with a medium sized person and get them to promote it. And you get a few more people, and then a few more and a few more. And that's how you're going to grow long term.
Yeah. So additional tips. So just like what other like best practices would you say people should do? Just overall with interviews, like to leverage it the most. Like I think one thing that like a little trick is to, after you interview someone, like ask them, hey, like would you know anybody else I can interview like that are similar, any friends, or while you have them on the call. Because cool people usually know other cool people. So that's one thing. Any
Yep.
other like general things you try to always do with interviews?
Yeah. I think that so you'll kind of so if you own a business, so this is kind of very dependent on if you're a business owner or not. But if you are, and you can pick up on clues throughout the interview if this person could be a good client for you or something like that, customer, or however you refer to them. And what
Or if
I've
you can help
done,
them in some way, essentially.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you had a sales call the other day that is eventually going to be a client of ours, and that came from an interview I did on my podcast. Who just throughout the interview, I would kind of drop like, yeah, like we do this. And I was just kind of like hinting at what we do as a business without like coming out. I knew what I was doing, but I wasn't like pushing it
Just
like
planting the
super
seed.
hard.
Just planting the
Yeah, I was
seed.
just planting the seed. And then afterwards, we were chit chatting after we clicked stop recording, and he was like, "So what do you guys do?" And I was like, "Oh, we do X, Y, and Z." He was like, "No, like, let me tell you, I was going to launch a podcast, and this dude bailed on me." And I was like, "Oh, dude, we can help you." And that's going to turn into a client.
Sometimes you can plant the seed in the pre-chat, like quickly just introduce yourself and tell them, like just to put in their mind, and then after an interview when they go over it and it went well, sometimes they'll ask you. So sometimes they'll ask you a question just out of reciprocation. Some personality types are like that. I don't know if you ever get that.
Yeah.
Like they like the conversation so much they'll just want to keep chatting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I think we covered a lot. Additional tips. I would say one cool thing that you do is you bring the guest back, or you've brought guests back. Was it because it was your best interviews, or because just to retouch?
I just want to see where they're going, because all my people are like up and coming. So I'm like, I want to hear about the evolution. And I think other people, we were 160 episodes in at that point. So I was like, hey, let's reach out to some of the people that were on a long time ago and see where they're at. And yeah, it was cool for me. I don't really care if anybody else liked it. I really enjoyed to hear like where they came from over the past, year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah. Cool. So that's all of everything you should consider if you want to have a successful podcast, especially if you're new. And I know it's scary when you're first starting out the first time, and everyone messes up with something. Like me, I probably messed up with quality a lot. And actually one mistake, shut up. One mistake I probably made a lot in the beginning was I made my interviews too long. That's an easy thing to do, especially if it's just
very easy.
Just like a friend or something. You want to kind of get to the point, unless you're Joe Rogan, where that's literally what you've been doing for 20 years. Like maybe he did one interview with Post Malone. It was like 4 hours. But then again, he said on one of the episodes after that they were on mushrooms. So kind of makes sense. They were talking about some weird stuff.
Yeah. But I think a lot of people look at people like that and think they can have long interviews too. And like,
no,
doesn't work.
They're celebrities. Like even their diehards aren't listening to the whole thing.
Right.
Maybe some weirdos. But yeah, cool. Hope you guys got some value. If you did, we'll see you guys next week. If there's anything you want to hear us talk about, let us know. Hit us up on anywhere, Facebook, Instagram. I'm sure people are listening. They know where we exist. We're Helms, Daxy Perez.
Yeah.
We're pretty. If you search our names, we show up. So,
search Senior Ryan on your favorite social channels.
Yeah. Although my podcast hasn't been showing up in Spotify, that's strange. I gotta check what's up with that. I think when I start posting content again, it'll be fine. So, cool. All right, guys. Thanks for being here, and peace out.